Hi lovely people, my name is Jen, and you will know that if you've watched one of our Teen Talk videos before, that as a group of kids and young people within London Road Baptist Church, we are working our way through a series looking at different Bible characters within the Bible and looking at their lives and their experiences and looking to see at ways that we can learn from those and how we can respond to those things that we read today. I believe that God's word is relevant, I believe that God's word is in the Bible, and I believe that God's word is relevant to us today too. And so this video I'm focusing on Elijah, and you can read about him in the book of Kings. Elijah was a prophet of God, and like a lot of our other videos and Bible characters, there's so much to say about Elijah. And there's so much to learn from his life. But in this video, I'm focusing on his qualities and how we can apply how he lives his life to our lives. So I just want to start by asking you, who do you admire? If you could meet one person whom you look up to, who you admire, and they can be anyone, living or dead, who would you choose? And I suppose more importantly, why would you choose them? Perhaps they've got characteristics or talents that you admire. Perhaps they're an influencer or the best gamer in the world. Perhaps they're a singer or an actor. Or perhaps they're just somebody who's really passionate about the same things that you are, and perhaps they speak out on these things, and so you look to them and admire them. But whatever your reasons for choosing somebody, I'm pretty sure they will have some good qualities that you look up to. I asked my son Jude, he's 6 years old, and he chose Virgil van Dijk for his football skills. Now Virgil, he plays for Liverpool, who my boy loves. And I thought about it for myself as well. And one of the people that came to mind would be Nelson Mandela. He was somebody who had a real big influence on South Africa, where I grew up. But who would you choose? And what would be your reason for choosing them? Sometimes, and I think we're all guilty of this, I think sometimes we look to the wrong things in people. I think perhaps sometimes we look at their skills and their talents. We look at their looks, or perhaps how wealthy they are. Maybe we look and we admire somebody who played our favourite character in a film. And we look at people and we think, oh, I'd love to be just like them. But perhaps if we looked further at them, we could see what their actual character was like and their qualities and the kind of people that they are. We might choose somebody different. So like I said, in this video, we're exploring the account of Elijah and the kind of person that he was. Now, Elijah, he's an example of a person who has qualities or characteristics like humility, commitment, wisdom, compassion, integrity, and endurance. And if you don't know what all of those words mean, then that's totally fine. I've looked up a couple as well, just to make sure that I have the correct understanding of each one. So I just encourage you to go and Google the words and just find out for yourself what each and every single one of those words mean. Do you think Elijah, he sounds like the kind of person that you trust or that you'd want to spend some time with? Perhaps he's somebody that you could look up to. And perhaps he even sounds like the kind of person that you'd like to be for yourself. So how can we follow the examples of Elijah's traits in our lives? And I think if we look at the example of Elijah, we realise it's okay to have people in our lives who we look up to, and it's important to choose good people and to choose good people for the right reasons. I think it's important in our lives to have people that we respect and that we can spend time with them and we can learn about them. And I think that's really, really important with our walk with God. In addition, I think it's really important that we can be the kind of role model that others look up to. And perhaps you can recognise some areas in your own life of where you can use the example of Elijah to try better at some of those qualities that I spoke about. But if we look at Elijah, and I'll give you a real brief overview of who he was. So he was the greatest Old Testament prophet. He was a speaker to the people from God. And Elijah had been one of God's prophets in Israel for many years. He spent his whole life standing up for God against the followers of false gods, including some of the kings and queens at the time. and he encouraged people to turn back to God. People at that time had turned away from God and they were worshipping false gods, and so they were worshipping false gods, and one of the gods that they were worshipping was called Baal. And so Elisha really encouraged people to turn back to God and to turn back to God's ways. And despite a few ups and downs, which is so often the way in these characters that we read about in the Bible, Elijah, he remained faithful to God, and he remained faithful to what God called him to do for the whole of his life. One of the other prophets at the same time was called Elisha. And Elisha had been with Elijah for about 10 years as his assistant. And I guess you can say that he was learning from Elijah, and that Elijah was a bit of a mentor to Elisha. In Elijah's final years, he was able to train up Elisha, ready to take on and carry on the job that Elijah had been doing up until this time as Israel's prophet. And after a life serving God, Elijah was able to pass on that baton of being a prophet onto Elisha. And I just want to encourage you for yourself to go away and read 2 Kings chapter 2, and just read verses 1 to 12 for yourself. And this is an account of Elisha's the end of his life, and in this passage we really see some of his qualities come out. You know, those really good ones that I spoke about earlier, like commitment and endurance and wisdom and integrity. But there's also some other things to look out for that really highlight these. So if we're reading chapter 2, verses 1 to 12, you'll see when you read it that Elijah knew that he was about to be taken up to heaven. And even at that time, he still went on a tour, like visiting other towns. And you could think, why did he do that? But he chose to visit these other towns because in those places there were other prophets, and Elijah wanted to offer them one final chance of teaching and encouragement before he was taken up to heaven. And you also see in those same verses, 3 times Elijah asks Elisha to leave him. And in these times you'll see his compassion and his wisdom. Because I think perhaps Elijah didn't want Elisha to see him go up to heaven. Perhaps he was trying to protect him. Or perhaps he even just wanted to test Elisha's faithfulness to himself and to God. Throughout these 12 verses, we see lots and lots of examples of Elisha's qualities like wisdom and compassion, humility and endurance. To me, he sounds like the kind of person that we can admire to be like. And for you, I just want you to think about three things really. So are there any practical ways in your life that you feel that you could perhaps have a little bit more or use the example of Elijah a little bit more in your life? The next thing I'd like you to really think about is, do you have somebody in your life now that you could spend time with and learn from, and learn about how to live the Christian life and how to learn just the ways of how to be in your Christian walk with God? Who is this person? Or perhaps who could your Elijah be? And the last thing is, do you have someone who you spend time with that perhaps can be your Elisha? So somebody that you can be a role model to, somebody that can learn from you the ways of being a Christian and the ways of living your life according to God's ways. Elijah, he lived a long life and it was a long life pleasing to God. And right to the very end of it, he was able to encourage Elisha, and he was able to be a role model to him. And I think it's important for us to have people in our lives that can be a role model to us. And I also think it's important that we can be a role model to others. And just right at the end, I just want you to take some time and spend some time responding to the things that we've thought about in this video today. And you might just want to spend some time praying, and you might want to consider the example a bit of Elijah and see how you can learn from that and how you can apply that to your life. And perhaps you could ask God to bring somebody to your mind that you think can be your Elijah and somebody that you can learn from. Or perhaps better still, you could say to God, I want to be a role model for somebody. Can you help me with this? And I just want to say that God, He wants to help us. He wants to be with us. And with God, we can do anything. And so I just want you to perhaps pray about it and say, God, I'm ready to do this and I'm ready to be a role model. And if you ask God, He will help you, and that's all you need. So I hope you guys are all doing really, really well. And if you ever want to chat, then you know where I am. Speak soon.